Hi, everybody. My name is Nicholas, and welcome to the Everything Design Show. Today, I have Tiffany with us.
Hi.
And hi, Tiffany. And Tiffany is actually the regional associate at Ogilvy Consulting. She's currently based in Hong Kong, and she has been working in the areas of business design, human-centric innovation, and she has a bachelor's in physical and biological anthropology. So, hi Tiffany, thanks for coming on with us today.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah, no, thanks for coming. I really, I actually met Tiffany a few months back, and we connected through LinkedIn. And we've just been talking about anthropology and how it's being applied outside of a very traditional roles of academic anthropology, knowing that she is someone who's in the industry, working as in the advertising field, and really using her anthropological skills and ethnographic methods to things to create campaigns, design apps. I think that's something that's very very interesting to hear and think about. So Tiffany, why don't you just maybe you can briefly tell us a little bit on what is it that you're doing now at Ogilvy?
Yeah, sure, definitely. Just to give everyone a little bit of background by myself, yes, I did study biological anthropology in Durham in the UK. Before that, I finished off my secondary education in Australia. When I was studying biological anthropology, I was actually quite interested in applying it to areas beyond academia. So after I finished it, I did a master's in marketing and business at Warwick University. And I was fortunate to be able to get a job afterwards at Ogilvy, which I've been with Ogilvy for nearly 4 years now. I started originally off in the Thai market where I was writing campaigns for various FMCG and, mainly FMCG, a lot of different FMCG brands targeting Thai consumers. And eventually I had the opportunity to move to join the consulting department, which I'm in right now. Within the consulting department, we're focusing on a lot of different areas beyond just marketing and advertising communications. We're looking at things into business design for different brands, human-centric innovation for for new platforms and also apps. We also look into things like data analytics. For my background, because I've always been quite, I guess, human first, especially due to my background in anthropology. I've been looking mainly into like the innovation space. So right now I'm working on a project that involves designing a new business for a new type of, for a new, I would say it's for a new community, and it's will be launching sometime later this year. I've been able to bring in my skills from anthropology, mainly helping in the user research, trying to understand the different behaviors of the target customer, looking into what are their key needs and pains, and trying to kind of really dig out the key insights that can help inform our strategy for how we launch, and also the key points to guide our overall platform and community design. I've also used that similar kind of method in approaching how I used to write campaigns back in Thailand. So it's roughly what I'm doing. Yeah.
That's good. That's good. So, I would assume that you've because you're in Hong Kong, you've worked in Thailand, and you've had education, in the UK as well as some in Australia.
Yeah.
I mean, I would mention you speak multiple languages as well.
Yeah.
And not just, I mean, most maybe most Asians would be bilingual, but you'll be trilingual because of your different backgrounds. But I guess I wanted to take it a little bit a step back.
Mm-hmm.
What made you pick a degree in anthropology? You talk about being interested in humans. Was it at that point in time when you started to be interested in humans, or was it in your work now as you graduated? But was this a journey that started way before as you were deciding which degree to take?
Yeah, definitely. When I was in secondary school, I'd always been interested in kind of like biology and psychology. Originally, I was thinking of pursuing a degree in one of those areas. And when I went over to the UK to kind of explore different universities, I was fortunate enough to be able to come across some students that had actually been studying anthropology. And what I really liked about anthropology was kind of the holistic way of approaching different aspects of humanity. And it takes it from the biological sense and social sense and also cultural. I think that kind of was like the perfect blend in the things that I'd been interested in, like biology and psychology. I also had a feeling that there were ways to apply it. Even though when I was quite young as a student, I felt like there were ways to apply it, anthropology, like the methods and etc., to areas beyond academia. So I think that's sort of how I kind of really leapfrogged into looking to anthropology. I think definitely when I was studying anthropology, it was interesting, of course, but at the same time, it was also a challenge, because having to think in a very holistic and I guess non-biased way, because a lot of things that we think are natural are actually influenced by our culture and the environment that we grew up in. We're so immune to that we don't even realize that we are being kind of molded by the environment around us. It was a challenge to kind of overcome that and to really think quite purely as how like a lot of famous anthropologists like how Malinowski and Goetz had always been thinking of, like trying to think in the perspective of who it is that you're observing. So it's been interesting and also a challenge, and definitely applicable to a lot of different things that I'm looking at nowadays.
Yeah. And then speaking of your degree, biology, looking at biology and physical anthropology, did you feel that, because you were in the UK, and I would imagine that the way that they taught anthropology was very traditional academic anthropology. Did you feel that, being an international student, or being Asian and having I guess a wide range of experiences from different cultures, did that make your experience studying anthropology in that particular context different from the other students, or was it did you feel that there was sort of an added I guess a skill set or value in that sense, or was it different in any particular way?
I think for me, definitely a lot of the different theories and pieces of literature that we looked at when studying anthropology in the UK, I felt I managed to find a lot of real life examples that I had personally experienced across different cultures to apply it to. So I think that kind of like the application of anthropology to day-to-day context is something that for me I felt was maybe possibly a bit easier, because I had been fortunate to have studied and lived in a lot of different places and managed to interact with a lot of different types of people, understood different types of cultures. So that would be the main difference for me. I think, like you said, yes, a lot of anthropology and quite a lot of different institutions are still taught quite traditionally, but I think having that kind of traditional kind of background is so necessary for any kind of student. The application itself, it honestly is dependent on you as a person. Do you want to apply it? You can apply it if you want. If you don't want to, that's okay as well.
Yeah, that's great. And I mean, there are quite a few researchers over the years. There's a few fields of applied anthropology, action anthropology, and then I think in a more modern times we're seeing the design anthropology fields. Were you, when you were graduating and looking for a job, did you think about taking that was it always a step forward to say that, hey, I want to move into more of these applied ways of using anthropology, as compared to working on anthropology in a more traditional sense? Was that the mindset that you had as you were going out into the workforce?
I'd say I was quite keen on it. I felt that I just had a feeling that there was a way to apply it outside of academia. But I think, was I 100% certain at that point? I think it's been a long journey of exploration. I'm still learning a lot nowadays. So at the start, I had a feeling, but I wasn't 100% sure. And I think over time, with the many different projects that I've managed to encounter and all the different situations at work, I think I've slowly started to understand how it can be applied. But obviously, there's still a degree of adaptability that we need to ensure we remember that there's no one size fits all. A lot of things that we learned in anthropology cannot always be directly applied to the situation, but that's because there's a difference between theory and real life, right? So that's for me. I had a feeling at the start, and then I think over time I've grown to understand how it can be applied.
Yeah, that's great. So speaking about I guess we're moving on into advertising, right? I mean, the advertising world has been around for a very long time. Would you say you were the first anthropologist in your institution at Ogilvy, or were there others before you when you were working in the offices?
Yeah, I actually am not the first one. Actually, I have actually met an anthropologist that I think he was here in like 2005 or something, like before my time. I started in, it's been a while now, 2016. He actually worked in I think the Shanghai or Beijing office, and he was a fully trained like anthropologist trying to help I think the planning team to gain better insights that could be used to inform different types of advertising campaigns. I think in the like kind of the current times, I would be one of the one of the younger ones, I guess. I'd say we also have in the UK office a department called the Behavioral Science Unit, and that one focuses on bringing in aspects of behavioral science and different social sciences to really kind of inform how we do marketing campaign planning on the other end up to like design and also like innovation. So I'm not the first one, but I'm definitely one of the newer ones in the current day context. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. So maybe you can talk, if you don't mind, just talking us through how does a typical project sort of run for you? I mean, and at which points do you see your the tools of anthropology or ethnography really being implemented in a regular design project that you're doing on a day-to-day basis?
Yeah, so naturally, the anthropology and ethnography, all of that contributes towards, I would say, the front end of any kind of project that we get at Ogilvy. Normally, after we get the brief from our client, we try to interpret it ourselves by mainly doing a lot of consumer research. We also do competitive benchmarking. I think the area where anthropologists can contribute the most is in doing consumer research, because a lot of times there's a difference between doing quantitative research versus qualitative research. An anthropologist would take it from a more qualitative sense, as opposed to maybe just looking at market insight data. We try to actually understand people's behaviors, not just based on what they say, but actually through observation and learning. And having that sort of knowledge and ability to do so in a way that is not biased is actually incredibly important, and being able to extract meaningful human insights that can actually be turned into that can actually be actionable and turned into strategy to inform our marketing campaign and also different areas of planning. So in terms of where I use it, I would use it at the start. At the same time, obviously, the whole advertising industry is going through a transformation where we are expanding to areas beyond just marketing communications planning. For Ogilvy, we've looked into areas, as I mentioned, like innovation and business design. So for these sort of projects where it's not campaign driven, there is a lot of opportunity to look more into the human behaviors, like doing user research to inform how we should redesign a new website for, say, a brand, or maybe actually coming up with a completely new app to, say, I don't know, order coffee, for example. I see the link between anthropology, ethnography, and what I'm doing right now. One mainly in the human insights area to inform marketing communications planning, but also to help guide largely innovation and customer experience design, which is the other thing that we're doing in anthropology and Ogilvy as well nowadays. Yeah.
Yeah, that's good. And I mean, it's great that we're seeing these, tools of anthropology being used at the start, which really helps to align a lot of the projects, I would imagine.
Yeah.
And these projects that you're talking about, when you do start on them, do they roughly take about the same amount of time? Do they take a few weeks, or do they usually take a few months, or how long is I mean, just a rough gauge, or is there a rough gauge if there is? Yeah.
Marketing communications planning usually has a quicker turnover. We do have to, I think the quickest one I've ever worked on was for 1 week.
Wow.
So we weren't able to go that in depth into understanding the different behaviors of consumers, but there's some other ways that we can still get valuable insights. It could be like helping to write a survey, or maybe doing a few quick interviews. Doing the full ethnography, that would be more suited to long-term projects, which would go into customer experience and human-centric innovation as such. So I think it will depend on, there's no like one set time frame for each project. Some are longer and some are shorter. It depends on the end deliverable. Yeah.
Of course. Yeah. And then you also talk about, I think, when we talk about anthropology and the tools that are used, I think in a design field where we're seeing that, I think across industries as well, within tech, a business, even there was a wine companies, hiring Intel to come in and do some research for them in the past. But I wanted to sort of ask, yes, these tools are being used, and we hear about these tools all the time. How's that process of translating those findings into insights? Because I'm sure different people translate research findings into insights in different ways. Do you personally have a view, or do you personally have a technique that you use to draw out some of these insights from the research methods or the research findings that you do, to especially when it comes to some of these different projects, like your not just the campaigns, but your human-centric or the innovation projects that you do?
I think that's actually a really good question, and I think it really depends on the project itself. I don't have a one-size-fits-all method. It depends on what is the exact deliverable that is expected at the end of the project. One thing that I've learned that I think is useful is actually getting the clients involved in the research process. For one of the projects I'm working on, we got them involved in some of the earlier primary research that we were conducting. And not just in designing the questions, but also conducting the research itself. And they actually found it very valuable to be able to understand and actually listen to the consumers that they'd normally just been thinking about in their office, to actually listen to what they're saying in like firsthand. I think that is incredibly important. And one thing I was thinking as you were asking me these questions that I would definitely recommend to any sort of social scientist or anthropologist that's interested in applying their skills to areas outside of academia is to kind of play a role as a little bit like how a consultant is. It's not just, although I do emphasize that anthropology and ethnography is really important in the research phase, I think there's we need to actually stay throughout the project and not just be seen as the researcher. Because if that's the case, if we're only offering insights that strategists or whoever is coming up with strategy or planning the new app or whatever is just, if they're just taking the insights from us and then using it for their own benefits, I don't think the insights will translate that well. So I think we also need to play a role as like a consultant and a strategist. So I think, so the two ways that I think are useful is getting the client involved and also trying to stay on with the whole project and actually being the strategist and consultant, not just the researcher.
Yeah, that's great, because I think this is of course just from a very traditional perspective, like maybe a traditional market research perspective, right? You would hire a market research company to come and do the research, and then the company will take the research, the insights, the findings, and then they will create the outcomes, or they will build the solution based on that. So I guess what you're saying, I do believe in that as well. And I think that, you know, the social scientist or the researcher needs to be throughout, you know, be there throughout that process. I think, and then I think, you know, we've also seen a lot of co-design, participatory design methodologies and methods and schools of thought. You know, I started out in Europe, you know, where, you know, the customer needs to be part of that process. The clients need to be part of that process throughout. And I think, you know, it's just, I think when I started learning about anthropology, and I started learning about the applications of anthropology within design, it didn't come as a shock to me. It just came as a thought. I mean, to me, it was like, why didn't, you know, it seems very straightforward. Like, you logically would think that, hey, actually this is something that's quite valuable to be there throughout that whole process, to speak to all these different people. So it's just, you know, I think these are two very valid points that sometimes projects do overlook, and I think, you know, what you're doing with in our organization now, and the techniques that you're talking about, they definitely are very valuable in my perspective. And I think, you know, your 2 tips, definitely, I think everybody who's listening should take those 2 tips, which is very good. Yeah.
And I think having an open mindset is also really important, because it is a challenge. And I've been fortunate to meet a lot of other anthropologists and social scientists that have tried to apply their methods to like areas outside of academia, and they've also described that it is a challenge sometimes to kind of get people on board to understand your different frameworks. And that's just life, to be honest. It's just if you maintain a positive attitude, and positive, flexible, and adaptive attitude, I think that's probably the best way you can find some way of leveraging your existing skills to help different organizations grow. And I think we all have to, it's also important to reach out to those within the network and try to really connect with each other, because I think we're strong as a team, as opposed to just me, myself, going to, you know, try to push anthropology and say like my organization or throughout Asia. I think it's important that we all work as a team and always think, you know, be flexible and adaptive.
Yeah. I mean, I think what you're speaking about definitely is very relevant. I mean, we got connected with each other, you know, based on that. You know, Tiffany, you know, came to find me on LinkedIn, and, you know, we just, you know, started having a conversation. I think the first time we chatted, we had an hour-long conversation just talking about different things and you know, sharing our perspectives on anthropology, which I thought was very refreshing. You know, I've always been very interested to learn about, you know, what other people are doing, and, you know, being stuck in my own silo is something that's I would not recommend it, you know. So, and I really appreciate that, you know, Tiffany connected with me, and, you know, after learning more about her background, the work that she does, I've always thought that it's really worth sharing with everybody else what you're doing and your journey as an anthropologist. So I guess maybe we can also talk a little bit about the initiative that you started, you know. So we were part of this. There is this bigger group, right?
Anthro Design.
Anthro Design. And Tiffany actually sent out an email a while back to seek out for like-minded members of the Anthro Design group in Asia, and that's how we got connected, and she's been talking to some of the other members of Anthro Design within the Asian context. So what has been what have some of the conversations been so far with some of the members within Asia, and what are the things that they've been doing, and what are your thoughts on it so far based on what you found?
I'd say that it's refreshing that a lot of us actually facing similar challenges. To know that we're not the only ones on the boat is actually refreshing to hear. A lot of different people that we've met in our group, although it is a small group, but it's a small and tight community. They've all mentioned that, sometimes applying some of the frameworks that we see other design anthropologists or anthropologists in general apply from that they use in the US or UK, applying that to different contexts in Asia might not be easily translatable. There's actually a need for us to kind of reframe some of the frameworks and make it a bit more tailored to how the mindsets and cultures are on this side of the world. I definitely getting clients to buy in is also a big challenge that we're facing. Having a voice that reflects this side of the world is also important, and being able to create more like resources that can help other anthropologists also within Asia, and also to kind of advocate and kind of promote our discipline to other people in different organizations in the industry is something that I think was echoing throughout what every member in our group has mentioned so far.
Yeah. So, I mean, you brought a very interesting point, which was about the geographical and those cultural contexts. So, I think this is a perspective we both share in how a lot of the resources that we're finding are set within a more Western context. The States and Europe. They've seen many years of discussing about the importance of ethnography, of anthropology, the social sciences, behavioral sciences within a business and a design and a technological field. But what would you say are some of the key differences between an Asian country like Hong Kong and Singapore that you've seen, or Hong Kong and Thailand, or even Australia, because the movement of design anthropology only started, I would say, early 2010s as compared to
it's quite new.
Yeah, it's still quite new, so based on your own experience, what would you say is the one thing that comes to mind that really is different between what we've read in a lot of the books or heard from based on the case studies as compared to what you're seeing in Asia?
In terms of, I can talk about the context of like applying design anthropology to different situations at work. I would say the amount of time that you have to actually conduct research and to apply different theories, etc., to what we do, at least from what I've experienced in the Thai market, Hong Kong, Chinese markets, it's quite limited. A lot of the clients here are not that are yet to see the value of research. I think it's just because they have not been exposed to it as much before. So there's a need to kind of educate them, and because they're not they don't have an appreciation for research here, and they're not that used to it. That limits our sometimes makes it a bit difficult for us to carry out extensive behavioral research, user understanding, etc. This is something that I think in a lot of other markets like US, UK, they do have the luxury of doing. I've spoken to anthropologists in say US, and they've had like several months to study one aspect, where I'm like, I've got 2 weeks to finish off my not just the research, but also come up with the strategy needed for say like a campaign, and you just don't have the luxury of time here. I think when you manage to find a client that actually understands it and is willing to let you do the research, actually if they have that understanding, it's not that difficult actually. I do think some of the language that you might use, like say behavioral science is a very popular topic right now that I think a lot of different agencies in the advertising world are also trying to bring in, including in Asia. Some of the terms that they use a lot of like psychology principles. Sometimes it's a little bit hard to explain in the local context. You really need to, it's not just translating, but it's like transliteration to an extent. Trying to apply that is challenging. But overall, I would say it's largely the difference in time, to be honest. And then I think time is an issue, but I think that relates back to the lack of appreciation towards research, which needs all the anthropologists, all social scientists in Asia, to actually kind of help clients to better understand clients, and also the organizations that we work in as well, actually. So I think it's the education barrier.
Yeah. Do you think that will change in the next maybe 5 to 10 years? I mean, from what I've seen in Australia, I think there has been a growth, a little bit in Singapore as well. But do you think in the next 5 or 10 years we'll see enough of that education for the industry to change a little bit? So in a sense, I guess, do you think that it's improving, as compared to when you started 4 years ago?
I'm an optimistic person, and I would say it has definitely been a big change. When I was working in Thailand, I already started to meet a lot of social scientists. One of them is in our Anthropologists in Asia group. They set up their own research agency that uses ethnographic research to inform product design and service design. I know that in one of the leading universities in Thailand, they also have managed to hire some behavioral scientists and also social scientists to help in the design and innovation space. I think over time, there is an opportunity for it to grow here, especially since a lot of markets in Asia are still growing themselves. I think there's a lot of opportunity in like China, Thailand, Southeast Asia overall, a lot of different markets. But at the same time, I think it's not just about it's going to grow and we just, it will just grow by itself. We need to play a role to advocate and really educate the people. If we don't do that, then I don't think it will grow. So it really depends on us. But overall, I would say compared to 4 years ago, yeah, definitely. I see a lot more new happenings here. Yeah, definitely.
I wanted to touch back a little bit on what you mentioned just now about I guess the big difference between the US and the UK as compared to Asia is that time that's being given for some of the projects. So, as compared to the UK or the US, where we're talking about, projects that give researchers a space of a few months, within some of your experiences, you may be given 2 weeks. And I guess from a very traditional research anthropological perspective, some research projects would last for many months, right? Do you think that, do you feel that there is a perspective or there are some views that, maybe from a very academic anthropology perspective, to say that, if we don't spend enough time doing that research, if we don't spend that few months doing that research, it misses out on a little bit of that research integrity. Because I was asked this question before, and I think my personal response was that not necessarily. I mean, and there is that value for the client and the customer and the project as well. But I just wanted to get your perspective on this, in terms of the length of the research and the depth of the research that is limited based on due to the client's project or the scope. Do you feel that with those limited runways, with those limited times or depth that can be done, does that water down the research integrity to any extent, or do you think that not really? It doesn't?
I think obviously with the amount of, if you can get more time, there's always an opportunity to find even more than what you'd see in just like a shorter period of time. But I think it's all about being adaptable. Sometimes, a lot of times, I think we shouldn't see the limit of time as something that is going to restrain us from doing what we can do. I think also in terms of the framework, the methods that we use here, maybe actually going to observe people in their own homes is not something that maybe culturally that's that comfortable here. Maybe we need to think of a different way to approach it. It could be like getting people to write like their own diaries. That might be something more comforting, and maybe actually through that you can still get a depth of detail, and maybe you don't actually need that much time to do so. So I think Obvious, as I said, yeah, obviously if you have more time, that's great. There could be more that you can discover. But if that's the case where you really, you're constrained, you only have a certain period, then we need to think of how to adapt. And I think, as I mentioned before, that's a really important mindset and ability to have here. Yeah.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, the adaptability is something that I think not just researchers, but even designers as well, all right, or advertising people who are working in advertising, your art directors. I think adaptability is is a good skill for anyone who's going into that the industry as well. So I definitely agree with you on that part. The other thing I wanted to sort of ask and talk about was, I mean, we go back to a little bit on the ideas of growing that education, growing that the knowledge base and the resources for an Asian anthropological, I guess, network in that sense. What are some of the initiatives that you're planning to do within the group, in the near future, to grow that network and to grow those resources? And apart from the plans, what are some of the things that other people can also do to contribute?
I think this podcast is a great start, and we're hoping to run more in the future. We have an opportunity to speak on the Human Show at some point, which is a podcast that's run globally by some other anthropologists. They started in they used to be based in New Zealand. I think one of them moved back to Amsterdam now. So we're hoping to use that as a way to create a voice. I think there is an opportunity for us to create some literature as well. But I think in terms of creating literature, we need to kind of balance the theory versus real life application. I think for a lot of markets here, sometimes if you go into explain like the whole theories about that you get from anthropology, different social sciences, that might actually not be the best way to approach this, because people may not see the relevancy and they may actually get bored. So I think in terms of creating literature, it needs to be really like applicable, and it has to be kind of really simplified to an extent so that it's easy for people to see the relevancy in a day-to-day context. In terms of like continuing to grow the group, I would love for more people to obviously join, but I think getting them engaged in creating literature and also join these podcasts would be like a great start. Did you have any opinions as well? It'd be good to
I mean, to be honest, I started this I started this podcast about 2 months ago, and to be very honest, actually Tiffany was the one that inspired me to get this podcast started. I mean, we were discussing about how we can grow the discussion for the Asian market about design, and I thought, why not just start with the podcast. So that really, I think after speaking to Tiffany, I just decided, okay, rather than talking about it too much, I'm just gonna start with the podcast, and have people like Tiffany on board, and some of the other members as well. So I think that's my way of contributing, in that sense. And I think we may be able to also look at maybe doing a few webinars or maybe some classes online, just to get people, give people that knowledge about what are the things that we do and the value of anthropology within a business and a design context. I think that's something that we definitely would want to have for the next few years. And for me, I think something that I felt that I've always wanted to do was to talk about it more. So I think that's what this podcast has been. So hopefully, the listeners, if you like what you're listening to, please do share them with your friends and family. And we just want to really educate as many people as possible, and talk about different things. I mean, today we spoke about the value of anthropology within design, some of the techniques, being adaptable. So I think that really is a lot that we can anybody who's listening to can unpack and apply within their own business or within their own career as well. So that's something that's Sorry,
and I think Well, one thing to also mention about the group that we've created, it's not just exclusive to people that have a background in anthropology. I think it's really important if we want to show the application and relevancy of anthropology to areas outside of academia. It's important to talk to a wide, diverse range of people. And so we also have people that don't have a background in anthropology, but maybe are working in areas like UX, UI design, user research, or maybe are just interested in understanding more about what is anthropology anyway. That's like that's one of the most common questions I get here. What is anthropology? And I think it's important to speak to a diverse range of people and to actually get them involved, and we kind of create conversations and more pieces of literature together. I think that it's also really important.
Yeah. So I mean, speaking about that, of getting people who are interested in anthropology. I mean, if I were to ask you and say, okay, I want to think of one anthropologist that you would recommend, maybe a listener to go and read up on to get a sense of what anthropology is. Do you think that you have one person that you could name that they should look into to learn about anthropology? It doesn't have to be, I guess, a very famous or one of the first anthropologists, but maybe your own favorite anthropologist that people can go get started on and get more knowledge in this area.
Yeah. I have two traditional favorites. I still like Malinowski and Gertz the most. I think the two that really helped me to understand the importance of seeing and understanding people not from your own context, but from their context. So for those that are interested in kind of understanding the foundations of anthropology, definitely recommend looking at those. For those that actually want to understand more about anthropology in the day's context, definitely look up Sarah Pink. She is based in Australia. She is a design anthropologist. She's working a lot in the automotive space, I believe. So it's actually really interesting to see how she uses ethnographic research to and apply it in areas beyond academia. Anna Kara is also a good one. And then, of course, yourself, Nicholas, for understanding about design anthropology and design world. Yeah. But there are loads. Also, in terms of an agency that actually applies anthropology and ethnography well to work nowadays, look up Red Associates. They're based in Denmark. Also, I'm going to do a little bit of shout out to my friends at Teak Research. They're based in Thailand. They do amazing work. Conifer Research in the US is also really good. And then, to be honest, a lot of anthropologists have helped a lot of big organizations, Microsoft, Google, Netflix, Lego was also one. So there are loads of examples, but those would be my top picks.
Yeah, oh, that's good. I mean, Sarah Pink. I mean, she was one of the first. I think her book is on using video in ethnography. So I think she was one of the key people that really used video within ethnography, and applying that within a design anthropology context. I mean, Menalowski and Gertz, these are two very key writers. And they've researched on many different cultures. And even in class we do talk about these two authors as well, and we talk about Lego as well.
One more.
Yes.
Remembered. Can't forget this person. She is an amazing anthropologist. Rita Denny. Look her up if you want to understand more about business anthropology, because they're like organizational culture, all that. I mean, culture, come on. That's to do with anthropology. She she's written quite a lot of books that help you to understand how you can apply anthropology in a more corporate sense. So it's worth looking her up as well. And then there are actually quite a lot of, there are a few anthropologists in different cities in China as well, that are also worth looking up. Happy to share more about it if anyone wants to connect with me on LinkedIn, I think it'll be a good place to discuss more about that.
Yeah, I mean, in the links in the description, I will definitely put, I'll share Tiffany's LinkedIn account for you to connect with her and have a chat with her. I also will be putting up the link to the group that we've been talking about, where we also share different articles and different case studies on design anthropology as well. The next question I wanted to get on to, to Tiffany was, as somebody who's been working in the industry for 4 years, somebody who, did a bachelor's in anthropology, let's say there are many graduates who are coming out into the industry now in Asia, right? What's one advice or two pieces of advice you would share to say that, okay, here are some tips that you might want to take up to be able to get into doing more applied anthropology in a design setting, within the Asian context. Doesn't matter where they are, whether it's from Singapore or Thailand or Hong Kong. What's a tip or some tips that you want to share with them?
Yeah, I think have an open mindset is really important. Don't go on LinkedIn. Please don't go on LinkedIn and type up anthropologist. I don't think it's a bit. Well, there could be some, but it's not. Usually, if you want to find ways to apply anthropology, it's not about going on LinkedIn and finding a job for an anthropologist. It's about thinking about how we can use anthropology in different contexts. So, like user research, that's a good way to start. Even like if you go and look up like strategists for like different advertising agencies, that's also I think you need to be able to make the link yourself, to be honest. As I said, there's no one size fits all. So having an open mind and thinking about how you can apply anthropology in a creative way is really important. Being flexible is definitely important as well. As I said, there's no one size fits all method. A lot of things that you may be quite passionate about and keep quite close to your heart in terms of what theories you've learned in anthropology, that might not be immediately applicable. You need to find ways to kind of tweak it yourself. And then what was my other? Definitely stay connected. Try to talk to a lot of different people. I am still learning as well. And yeah, don't need to feel too hard on yourself, I think. Try to remain be positive all the time. Yeah,
that's good. I think the important point definitely is the job titles, because we're seeing quite a lot of job titles for these ethnographic or anthropology skills and methods being applied in different job titles that are out there and different job descriptions. So I mean, you talk about within the user research aspects, there's design researchers as well. So in the previous guest that I had, Wei Dan, he was one of the previous guests that I had. Wei Dan, he's a design researcher, and he uses a lot of the social science and anthropological skills as well. We also, I think there are job roles like user experience researcher, experience designer. I think definitely typing in anthropologist may not get you the you may have to move to the States or the UK or Europe to find jobs like that. But I think I agree, definitely within the Asian context you may not find design anthropologist or design ethnography or ethnographer as a job title, but there are quite a few different roles that we're seeing out there, which is great.
And even if you get let's say you get a job as a user researcher or like a strategist at an ad agency, even if you can't immediately apply some of the frameworks, or maybe it's just really too challenging to apply, that's okay. I think the training that you get as an anthropologist already helps you to think in a very unique perspective, like a very holistic view that you can naturally infuse in anything that you do in your work. So it doesn't have to be, I must take this framework and apply it here. It's kind of about the whole thinking process. I think a lot of the times when and that could be one of the key barriers as to why a lot of clients still don't see the value of research, is that they may get afraid that there are so many complicated research methods. How do we apply A to B? Sometimes it's not so much about you definitely need to apply this framework, but it's just about the whole thinking. And I think if you can naturally weave it in, that's probably the best way. Yeah.
Yeah, that's good. That's good. Yeah, I think that's a good note to sort of end off on. I think if anybody who is definitely interested in this area, and especially in applying anthropology within the advertising field, please do connect with Tiffany and have more conversations with her. Join the group, and then we will make more connections and we'll talk about it as well. I mean, we are Tiffany, myself, and others. We are striving and trying to grow the community as much as possible, and we would love to have more contributions, as well as more people just join in the conversation and talk about their experiences, because I definitely have learned a lot from Tiffany and learned a lot about her work based on the conversations we've had. And then because coming from an academic perspective, it's always valuable to speak to people who are working within the industries, and the problems that you guys face about project deadlines, about scope, about adaptability. The theories can only go so far, which you like what you're mentioning about, which I think it's definitely very applicable when we're talking about the use of these skills within the workforce. So so I mean, I guess that's that sounds like a good time to end off. I'll let Tiffany go, but I really want to thank her very much for coming on to the Everything Design Show to share about her work and just to really share about her journey into how she's got to where. No, really, thank you very much, Tiffany. So please do connect with Tiffany as well as the Design Anthropology Group, Asia Group, and then we will continue.
Name will be changed at some point. Yes,
yes,
I know it's a bit long. We'll thinking about it.
So this is one of the projects that we have a little bit more scope and time to do that user research, right? So the good thing we have a little bit of time and not such a small deadline for that. So that's good. So with that, I'll end off. We'll end off today. And thank you everybody for listening to this episode of the Everything Design Show. Please do connect with us if you have any questions or any topics that you would like us to talk about in the future. Have a good day, and thank you very much for your time. See you. Bye, everybody.
Thanks everyone.